Okay, and again, thank you and welcome. My name is Giles Palmer. It's an honor to be co-moderating this session with my good friend, Magdalena Depa-Martynow. She's an embryologist, she's an experienced embryologist in her own right, but also the manager of the Global Reproductive Health and Clinical Specialist team at Cook. This session has been put together with interviews recorded from places like Athens and Cardiff and Spain and New York, while the speakers get ready for the ASRM meeting. And we hope to pop in and see them later on today and find out what is trending. This has been helped very much by the kind support of Cook Medical, who have allowed us to use their booth in their conference center as you pop in and see what's going on. So please enjoy the session. Over to you, Magdalena.
Thank you so much, Giles. It's a big pleasure to co-moderate this session with you today. So Giles actually said that he doesn't need an introduction as a regular i3 moderator, and it's very true that I cannot imagine actually that there is still someone who don't know who Giles Palmer is. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, Giles Palmer is an executive director of the i3 initiative, constantly curious and passionate ASRM senior embryologist, consultant and product developer in a wide range of areas within the industry. So now we can actually start. Remember, ask your questions using Q&A section of the conference service and not on the chat function. Thank you so much. It's time to introduce the talk by Santiago Mune, sponsored by Overture Live. So who is Dr. Santiago Mune? This is the person who actually developed the first pre-implantation genetic tests for aneuploidy. He's adjunct professor at Yale University OBGYN department. He published more than 260 scientific publications, received SART and ASRM prize papers and the ASRM Star Award consecutively for 2011 to 2020. In 21, founded Reprogenetics with Jack Cohen and David Sable, and as its CEO, Reprogenetics became the first commercial US PGT lab. In 2017, he joined Martin Versavsky and Jason Horkahadas to co-found Overture Life, a company focused on automating the IVF laboratory. His talk is kindly sponsored by Overture Life, and Dr. Santiago Mune will talk today about non-invasive embryo selection through metabolomics. We welcome you all to watch pre-recorded video.
So thank you, i3, for hosting this seminar. Today I will talk about embryo selection through metabolomics. As you know, a PGT-A in the standard format through blastocyst biopsy, it can improve and increase implantation rates for per transfer. It can reduce miscarriage rates. It can increase live birth rates per transfer, reduces time to pregnancy, and enables confident single embryo transfer. What it does not do is it does not create euploid embryos, obviously, and it does not improve cumulative pregnancy rates. This is a selection method, and therefore we cannot do that. We just can select those embryos that are normal if there is anyone that is normal, right? However, the method requires blastocyst biopsy. And as you know, blastocyst biopsy is user dependent and requires high skill levels. So far, there have been 2 non-selection studies that have found that trifecta biopsy is benign, although both of them come from the same center, which is a center of excellence for PGT. These studies were from Richard Scott and from Tiggs et al. Both of them showed no significant effect of blastocyst biopsy. However, if it's not done perfectly, it could be detrimental. For instance, large trifecta biopsies can reduce implantation. Then also, depending on the blastocyst hatching method, it can affect the outcome. There have been reports that PGT artifacts result from bad biopsies, so decreasing the quality of the biopsy increases the noise, and you have these false chaotic embryos. And then we had the STAR study, in which this was a large randomized trial on PGT, in which we found that PGT improved results in patients over 35, but it didn't improve results in patients younger than 35. And despite the fact that in those patients, 30 to 40% of embryos were chromosomally abnormal. So that difference, why there was no beneficial effect on these patients, could be because of the biopsy. And recently there have been a bunch of papers showing that there are obstetric and perinatal complications from blastocyst biopsy. Trophectoderm biopsy increases risk for preeclampsia, placenta previa, and hypertensive disorders, and decreases beta-HCG levels. So in the last few years, there have been several attempts at performing non-invasive selection of embryos through different methods. We have non-invasive PGT, AI selection, and I'm going to present today metabolomics selection. Regarding AI, these are a series of papers that have been published. Although all of them have a lower accuracy than PGT-A, as you could see here. Regarding non-invasive PGT, also lots of papers, lots of research in this field. This is just a table of those papers that had at least 85% concordance or above with trophectoderm biopsy or whole embryo biopsy. As you could see, in the last one of these papers by Majunkova et al., they achieve 100% concordance with an aneuploidy, and they have also a very high rate of informative results. Although most of these studies are very, very small, 150 embryos. The largest study, and that was a prospective study, is from Rubio et al., 1,000 embryos. And as you could see, the concordance and the informative rate, it's still lacking. So 89% of the samples could be read, and only 78% of euploid embryos, of embryos had concordance with euploidy and aneuploidy with trophectoderm biopsy. In addition, there are other shortcomings from non-invasive PGT. For instance, it's recommended to culture to day 6, because then you have more DNA in the media coming from the embryo. Also, it requires changing the media on day 4. And then it's very sensitive to maternal contamination. There are some reports showing that at least 50% of the samples have maternal contamination coming from corona cells. And obviously, this masks the true ploidy of the embryo. And depending on the studies, you have about 70% of samples that are informative and correct. And then at the end of the day, just for both, for non-invasive PGT and for PGT with biopsy, euploidy is just an imperfect proxy for implantation. Still, 30% of euploid embryos do not implant, even though they are euploid. And therefore, methods that would identify those embryos would be great in order to improve further embryo selection. We have developed a method based on metabolomics, and this method is non-invasive. It's resistant to corona cell contamination. It's highly informative, so 99% of the samples give us results. It has high accuracy in detecting euploidy with about 95% concordance or above. It has high accuracy detecting implantation also. So if you combine those two, you can identify those embryos that are euploid and that they don't implant, which is about 30% of euploid embryos. So with this, we aim to have a much higher implantation rate when we do this type of selection. Also, the method it's much cheaper than PGT in general. So what's metabolomics? Basically, we're detecting in the sperm media those metabolites that the embryo is secreting. So it's basically like a urine test for the embryo. We have developed two indexes. One we call the Metabolomics Euploid Index. Basically, these are biomarkers that are related to euploidy. And then another one for pregnancy. The two sets of biomarkers are different, but we can combine them. And then, as I said, we can detect those embryos that are euploid and that never implant. So we are, to validate this method, we have three phases. The first phase is discovery phase, in which we use very sophisticated equipment to analyze and detect these biomarkers to find out which biomarkers are related to euploidy or implantation. And then once we have those biomarkers, we do a target retrospective analysis only with those biomarkers and with simple equipment that can be later translated and put in an IVF center or in a reference lab. And finally, once we have validated this method in this equipment, then we are starting already a clinical phase. We'll start with non-selection studies. And also this has to be done with each method, with each culture method. So the technique is specific for each culture media. Right now we're assessing two culture medias, the one from Vitro Life and the one on global media. So for the discovery phase, we use this platform, ultra performance liquid chromatography coupled with Orbitrap fusion 3-bit mass spectrometer. And with this method, we can detect 7,000 metabolites at the same time in a femtomole level. Actually, it's so sensitive that we have to dilute the sperm media. So you can appreciate how sensitive is this piece of equipment, which is about $2 million, I think. And with that, we have identified those biomarkers that are correlated with implantation and euploidy. Then we pass to discovery. In this discovery phase, we were able to get an accuracy of 97% with euploidy. This is using global media. And also the same for euploidy, we had an accuracy of 97%. So when we call an embryo euploid, 100% of the times we find it that it's euploid, and we call it aneuploid. None of the embryos were euploid. We did the same with pregnancy. Also, we have a 97% accuracy with pregnancy rates. And again, a very high specificity and sensitivity. Then we move to the validation phase. As I said, we're using a much simpler equipment. And here we compare the results using this other piece of equipment. This is data from using Vitro Life media, and we get an accuracy of 88%. So if you compare this with the best PGTA results published, Tiggs et al. 2020, they had 65% specificity and 0% false negatives, which is exactly the same as we are finding right here. This obviously is embryos that were transferred without knowing the metabolomics test. So it's basically, it's a non-selection study. and therefore you cannot expect that you'll have a much higher results due to non-embryonic reasons and so forth. It could be endometrium, the transfer, and so on. Interestingly, what we found is that, for instance, if we separate these embryos in 3 categories, so low potential, medium potential, and high potential for being euploid, we have 29% of euploid samples that never implant, which makes sense. It's those euploid embryos that I said that never implant, and we can identify them, as you can see here. Then there is a small group of embryos that have medium potential, average implantation about 20%. Is it possible that this is the group that are mosaics? We don't have enough data yet to correlate with mosaicism. And then we have a group of euploid embryos with very high potential to implant, 96% implantation. When we don't do PGT, and these are mostly egg donors, therefore 72% overall implanted. Here we found also a group of embryos that with 0% implantation, a medium group, and then a very high potential group of patients. If we put this together, we could expect that if we do metabolomics and we use it for selection, we could increase to 85% implantation, but it could be even higher because this is, as I said, with egg donors. If we use it in the general population, we should be able to identify many more embryos that never implant. So if we eliminate the medium groups and focus on the embryos that have very low or very high implantation potential, then really we can get an accuracy with pregnancy that it's very high, 96% implantation potential. 0% false no results, 87% specificity, and 100% sensitivity. Again, comparable or better than best PGT-A results that are published. In addition, the method has very low no result rates, 0.1% no results, compared to 11% published in the largest study for non-invasive PGT. And now we are starting the clinical phase. We're doing 2 non-selection studies, one with Vitrolife Media and another with Global Media. Each one has about 300 patients, and there are no age restrictions, although we will split, we will have 50% patients under 35 and 50% above 35. Normal ovarian reserve, no PGT, single embryo transfer, and the endpoint is ongoing pregnancy rates. Both of them are multi-center, and we have centers in the US, Europe, and Latin America already enrolled. Although for one of the studies, we're still including centers. So if you are interested, we still can include maybe 1 or 2 more centers. So the potential advantage of these metabolomics test is that 1, it's non-invasive. There is very little change in IVF lab protocols, with the exception that you need to culture in individual droplets from day 3 to day 5. It has very few no result rates compared to non-invasive PGT. It has very high concordance with aneuploidy and implantation. And we can detect those embryos that are euploid but never implant. Thank you very much for your attention, and to my team. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them after this talk, or you can email us at this email. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that excellent review of metabolomics. We shall be joining you later, I believe, but is it okay if I ask you a few questions?
Sure, yes, please.
We've seemed to have come a long way with metabolomics, perhaps from the early days of Lee's and the quiet embryo, and then work by Denis Hakas, but what's been the main jump in recent years with metabolomics that now you have this data?
Definitely the equipment. So it's much more sophisticated, as you have seen. The piece of equipment that we use for discovery can identify these metabolites at the femtomole level, and they are able to identify metabolites that were not able to be identified with the other method. And the other thing, probably that it's very important, is that we are validating the method for every culture media, which was not done in the previous studies.
Okay, sure. And there seem to be quite a few, techniques which are available for evaluating embryos, and there's almost a split between, I think in the States, people are doing more like PGT, and perhaps in Europe, they're using more time lapse. Where do you feel that metabolomics can fit into this?
Well, definitely in Europe, since it's quite resistant to PGT, I think it will fit very well. Definitely, I think our method is comparable or better than AI. And in the US, there is still maybe 50% of cycles that are not PGT, and therefore those can utilize this method. And eventually, I think that some centers could face embryo biopsy and use metabolomics because one, it's cheaper for the patient, so there is no embryo biopsy cost. And second, if the biopsy is not done really well, it could be detrimental. Therefore, obviously, I cannot say that yet because we don't have the data. That's why we're doing these studies. But if there is no negative biopsy effect, then we should see an improvement in results. Since the discordance is 3%, 4%, and the embryo damage could be much higher than that. For instance, 30% or so of embryos in the STAR study were aneuploid in the younger group, but then we didn't see an improvement in results. So there has to be a reason for that. And it could be embryo biopsy, right?
Yeah, and it seems to be in the validation, very accurate. And is that all down to the like machinery which you're now using and the biomarkers which you're now available to look at?
Yes, I would say yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is it like a score? Like before, you'd have like perhaps the metabolism linked with like the development. So is it a score that you'd get after?
Yeah, it is a score. It is a score. Right now, as I said, we are classifying embryos in 3 groups. Probably once we have more data, we can either enlarge it, or meaning reducing the middle group, or maybe that would be depending on the patients, right? On the patients and the centers, if they either prefer a scale or black and white. Doctors tend to like black and white, but again, we don't want to fall in the mistake of PGT, in which if you say this embryo is euploid or this embryo is aneuploid, then you transfer, somebody starts transferring aneuploids, and some of them were actually mosaics and some of them implant, and then you say, all the aneuploids have some potential, which is not true. Sure. So I think it's better to do a gradient and say this has low potential, it has medium potential, this has high potential. And not to enter into if this is mosaic 30% with
I understand. What about and I remember in the past, like sampling from like micro drops and and sending away. Is that how you do the analysis at the moment, like, and what's the bias with the sampling errors, if there are?
Yes, so actually you don't need to culture in small droplets as with some methods of non-invasive PGT. And as I said, actually, when we receive the samples, we have to dilute them. So that tells you that it's not a matter of sampling.
Right. Mm-hmm. And this uses this, expensive piece of equipment, which you said, but isn't your main aim, and we had a very interesting talk a few months ago from your group about the lab in a box. So
Yep.
is this sort of one step towards that, and is the validation process?
No. So the discovery phase was done in a very sophisticated piece of equipment. Now we have translated it to more affordable. It's still $400,000 the equipment, and we have talked with some manufacturers that think that it could be simplified and put in a smaller piece of equipment that then we could maybe integrate it in the IVF lab in a box. Regarding the IVF lab in a box, right now we're working on automating egg freezing and egg thawing, or embryo freezing and embryo thawing, which is almost done. We think that we could have these in the market, in unregulated markets, by next year. We are also have improved quite a bit our ICSI automated method. It's working very well also to automatically inject eggs. We are doing the first human experiments right now. And then in the middle, basically what you have is embryo culture and maybe sampling. Well, embryo culture you need, then denudation, right? Mm-hmm. And sampling the sperm media for non-invasive analysis. And that's the third machine that we are developing.
Sure. So all these roads of research are leading into one.
Yes.
Hopefully, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially interesting is the robotic ICSI, which we'll hopefully hear about in the future from you in a short while. So thank you very much. I believe you'll be at ASRM, so I hope we'll be able to talk then. But again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll see you at the ASRM.
Thank you. Can I ask you a silly question though now? Yeah. Do you have a vineyard or a wine company, which I heard about?
No, I don't. But I'm helping this vineyard that it's basically aging the bottles at 35 meters under the sea, and it's great because I have my bottles there. I have to scuba dive to go to find them. And each one of them is different because it had different incrustations. Actually, I have one here. I'll show you. 1 second.
Okay, I'm waiting.
So you see, each one of them has different incrustations. So
that is perfect. That is perfect.
Cool. They're great for presents.
Yeah. That's perfect because I thought I read somewhere this. And then I thought I must be mad, because no one else knew about it. So I thought I'd ask you about that. And it's a way of keeping the temperature the same because at 35 meters, yeah. Exactly.
The temperature is constant, also because of the pressure. Well, this is champagne, so yeah, the bubbles are very small, and yeah, it's great. Very good.
Excellent. Okay. Keep me a bottle. I'll be there. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Okay.
Okay, well, there you are. That was a very entertaining talk, and it was very enjoyable, and I hope you like that too. Don't forget, we can ask questions live to the team who are going to be at ASRM shortly. But now on to another disruptor in IVF that we'd like to speak to. So we'd like to speak to Cynthia Hudson. So can we please play the video? Okay, I'd now like to introduce Cynthia Hudson. She's a working embryologist and entrepreneur and industry trailblazer as VP of Clinical Strategy at Tomorrow Life Sciences, a company who have created a powerful awareness of the growing problem of cryostorage, but the world's first only automated platform for tracking and management of cryo samples. So welcome, Cynthia. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. How are you? Thanks, Giles. That was a great introduction.
No, well, thank you, and thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what's happening with Tomorrow then? What's new?
What's new? Well, we're working on a cryo storage solution. As you know, cryo storage is a massive problem in this industry. You don't need me to tell you or your audience that. And we're working on a system to effectively track and trace each sample into and out of cryo storage using RFID technology.
And I'm speaking to you now from your headquarters in New York, yeah?
I am actually, yes. Yes, I am. We have two offices right now. One is a working lab for demonstration for our product engineers, R&D, and we have a corporate head office. I'm in the working.
Okay,
right
and
now.
and a little bird told me that you're coming my way. You're coming to the UK.
That's true. We just opened an office in London, and we will be commercially live in the UK in 2022.
Brilliant, brilliant. And for those that don't know tomorrow, you have like designed from scratch, I presume. You know, you've designed your own system for cryo storing samples, yeah, after IVF.
We took an existing automated store unit that was on the market, and what we did was we modified it for fertility tissue. So most of the world does not freeze in less than a microliter of fluid on the end of the little plastic straw. Most of the world freezes in a larger form factor, a vial or bag. And we needed to be able to figure out a way to take these precious cells, single cells, frozen on the end of a plastic stick into and out of vapor storage effectively. And so that's where Tomorrow came in. So Tomorrow developed the proprietary labware, hardware, and software to manage these things, and incorporated RFID technology, so that was a hands-free experience.
And I've often heard it being called like robotic. So is it sort of like a robot in that sense? I mean, is it sort of automated?
Yeah, it's automated. The automation moves. You press a button, the thing moves over, it gets you your sample, and then you put it back. It's yeah, exactly. You tell it what you want, and it gives it to you, like an ATM.
Okay, okay. And of course, this week ASRM is on at the moment, and you'll be there as well, yeah?
Well,
are you showing off something?
I am showing off something. Yes, so we developed a newer version of our cryo storage robot, and I'm pretty excited about it. And we're actually going to bring a prototype to ASRM, and we've got a ton of meetings lined up, and we're going to show it off. So
you're going to launch it then at ASRM, yeah, this year. But is there any chance of like a sneak peek?
There is actually. So let me just move my here. So if I look right there, that in the background, we have two of our Generation 1 robots, and this is the new Cryo Robot Select.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You might notice by the TMRW on the front. Yes, we made it.
Okay, so like the previous generation at the back there, and your new version, which looks like it's got a smaller footprint, because I think the other one was quite large, wasn't it, in that sense?
It's quite large, and I think there are use cases for both. So, you know, if you think about what fertility clinics have become, in effect, they have become biorepositories. So these clinics are now sitting on thousands of patients of frozen tissue. So the larger one is the capacity of 4,165 effective kings. So we've developed this container that is RFID chipped. And all of these, this is effectively the cane goblet analog. It has an RFID chip in the bottom. And all of these get checked into and out of storage. That's sort of the high capacity model. And then we've developed this new one, which is a smaller footprint, smaller capacity. And I think there are use cases for both.
Okay, right. And any new features in that?
Our software is fully compliant with high trust and other data security paradigms that we're running through right now. But the way it works is that every specimen is checked into and out of storage, so that the inventory is perfect in real time. So we can effectively eliminate annual audits. We can effectively eliminate any chances for error in data recording. What is the reason that clinics have started to do annual or at certain interval audits in the first place? Answer that, Giles. Why do we do inventory audits? I'll answer it for you. We do inventory audits because our record keeping is terrible. So we need to make sure that what we've written down, in our 3-ring binders or index cards, and you know who you are, or Excel spreadsheets, that data matches what is physically in the tank. And in a recent anonymous survey that we did last year, about 300 embryologists, we found that 27.8% of them recorded that they could not identify, locate, or were unsure of specimens in their inventory. 27.8. That is a disaster for this industry waiting to happen. And so as a compensatory measure, we've come up with annual audits and inventory, and that brings a whole host of other risks into the system. There is no conferred benefit onto a sample to take it out just to look at it and make sure that you wrote it down correctly. So we're mitigating risk and we're introducing risk in certain areas just to compensate for a system that hasn't been paid much attention to in the last 40 years. It's a largely ignored area of the clinic, and
and there you see it would introduce danger in every time that you open the lid and have a look at a sample, of course, for de-vitrification. So that that's the thing that we've spoken about many times on I3 about that as well. So you're going to eliminate auditing. What about the storage problem? Because it's sometimes the last thing that people think about when they design a clinic, isn't it?
Unfortunately, yes, it is. We've both been involved in that. Oh, cryo storage, the tanks will go over here. No, it's a massive problem, and I think clinics are starting to realize it. I think they're realizing that it's not sustainable, it's not scalable, and you can't just keep knocking down walls, to continue to store these things. Especially now in the UK, where you need to keep them now 55 years. It's going to become an explosive issue. It is an explosive issue, but it will become an explosive issue more and more. The clinics have to have a mindset now of what do they want to be when they grow up? Do they want to be a biorepository, or they want to be an embryology lab and clinic? And right now they're acting as both. And I would argue that they're doing one section of that quite poorly. So we need to start coming up with ways of identifying what are the current family building tissues that need to be easily accessible for the therapeutic clinic during this period of time. And I think you might have done a recent analysis of how certain tissues were accessed and when they were accessed. How often is a sample accessed after 3 years of storage? Does that tissue need to be stored on site? I think we really need to start shifting the mindset. We're at an inflection point. We're really busting at the seams, and we really need to come up with better solutions. It's not sustainable to continue to store everything on site all the time. And for some clinics, it might be the right answer, but we need to figure out, what do we keep on? How do we manage it correctly? And what do we need to keep off for longer term archival storage?
Yeah, sure, because there's a growing inventory of these dormant samples, if you like, okay, and going nowhere. And perhaps the insurance, okay, or the danger can be passed on if it's done into a third party, if it's stored outside.
Well, there's liability. You're never going to completely remove the liability, right? Unless the clinic gives up ownership to the sample and sends it elsewhere, then the patient relationship then goes to the third party. That is one way to do it. There are paradigms that exist today. What we want to introduce is a paradigm where it's still your patient, it's still your tissue, but you are now going to have complete visibility into what is on site and then what is off site, and then develop that logistic platform to make sure that they get back and forth, when needed. But there's no reason for your clinic to continue to knock down walls to try to manage an inventory. Let's let embryologists be embryologists. Let's let them work in the embryology lab. Let's not have them be biorepository managers. It's not their core competency, and it's not what they want to do in the first place. So let's figure out who we are and the way we've been living, and do something about it. A sample that is stored off-site, it's managed by people that know how to manage samples. These are biorepository technicians. These are cryotechnicians. These are humans that their entire day job is to manage and store samples. It's not their entire day job to perform ICSI and embryo culture and dish preparation and patient contact. That's the core competency of an embryologist, not sample management. And I think we really need to recognize that and bifurcate these roles.
So Cynthia, tell me, what about the security issue of the actual access to this new device?
Well, our Generation 1 model uses a password protected interface, and our Generation 2 model, we've decided to employ a retinal scan, which, as you know, is much more secure than facial recognition. So now that you can walk up to your sample with your transporter, and you can walk up and you can scan your irises and then place the samples in and store them.
Wow, okay.
There's dual factor security. We do make you put your password in once per day, but the entire rest of the day you can do a retinal scan, which is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. It's fantastic. And really, it sort of reinvented the dewar, if you can call it a dewar anymore, you know, like the cryo space, isn't it? Because it's, you know, it's not this clunky piece of metal, is it? It looks quite stylish. That's nice.
It's not. I mean, what have we changed in the last 40 years for cryo storage? We're using the same dewars, the same 3-ring binders, the same 3x5 index cards. We're using the same Excel spreadsheets. And that was fine when you were managing 1 or 2 dewars with a couple hundred patients, but it is not fine when you're managing upwards of 10,000 patients. It is completely unsustainable. It is a disaster in the making. I can tell you many horror stories of embryologists that have recalled times where they've gone to retrieve a sample and the sample isn't there. And it's an all hands on deck, start looking in the neighboring samples. Did you put it in tank 3, canister 4, and you wrote down that you put it in tank 4, canister 3? You know, I mean, what are the possibilities? Were numbers transposed? This is,
of course,
this is unacceptable. And made a lot of advancements in fertility. And this area has been wildly neglected.
Yeah, and like, because they're stored for so long now, and there's campaigns to store, okay, that, you know, you can't just store in these old dewars anymore. You know, you've got to store in something, you know, safer and more reliable, and is going to stand the test of time as well, isn't it?
I mean, these dewars were never meant for long-term storage. It was never meant for 50 years of cryo storage. And the other thing that we can talk about is the fact that we're monitoring this tank 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by yours truly for no extra charge. And we're, as a company, committed to making sure that this system is working at optimal level at all times. And so that you don't need to be entirely responsible for maintaining your cryo inventory. So from a liability perspective, some of that now comes on us because we're watching the tank just as carefully, if not more, than you. Is
that your own sort of like monitoring system, alarm system, other than the other alarm systems which are available? Has it got like its own inbuilt sort of alarm?
Exactly. And we have multiple redundancies in that system, you know, for tank and for temperatures, but we have monitoring on all aspects of the system, on the automation, on the power consumption, on the computer, on our witnessing RFID reader board. We have full visibility into the system to know at an instant if there is something amiss or something awry. I know instantly if you have not swapped out your supply tank and that it is not hooked up to a supply. It's something that we're pretty serious about. We've come up with a name for it. It's called Overwatch, and Overwatch comes with every unit.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, we've got telemetry all over this unit, and our teams are watching it 24 hours a day. The standard traditional dewars were not meant for internal monitoring. How do most people monitor? They drill a hole through the top of the styrofoam cap and they thread a probe through there and then slap a little monitor on the side. You know, it wasn't built for it. It's not purpose built. This is fit for purpose and purpose built for cryo storage for long-term use.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And you said you shall be at ASRM, so hopefully we'll better see each other, even if it's only virtually. So again, thank you for your time.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks so much, Giles. Appreciate it.
Well, there we go. With the
Wow.
magic of, well, exactly. We had a great time putting that together over the last few days. Now all the gang should be at ASRM, and I wonder if in true sportcaster style, we can perhaps go over to see them. Okay.
Hey, y'all.
Hi there. How are you doing?
Hello.
We're doing great.
I
How
should
are
be
you
like this,
guys?
shouldn't I? Okay. So I'm joined by Klaus Weimer, is that right? And Hudson
Yep.
Halas from
Yes,
Overture. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Hey, CSO of Overture.
Right, well, thanks. Well, first of all, I should just say that thanks again for Cork for letting us take over their booth, in fact, okay? So there's a small place, I think it's 1220, the booth, okay, in ASRM, and they've got a whole lot of people in there at the moment there. Now, I know you've got to be at some lectures shortly, so shall we start with some Q&A, some questions? Magdalena, would you like to ask some questions?
Absolutely. Hello, once again. So the first question I would like to ask is that you say that more biomarkers are being used. So what new biomarkers are shown?
You say what? Of course, I cannot say which one are because they're already under patent. So some of them have been previously described, but at the end, the most important is the combination of biomarkers. So the algorithm that we have developed to get this MPI.
Okay, sure. And like we have seen, you know, a lot of studies with Metabolomics over the years. You know, like, could you say this is like Metabolomics 2.0 as like PGT was there, because there's been this advance. Yes. And of course, if Santi was there, he could tell you about his, you know, his work with fish and how that developed. You know, is it sort of that big a leap?
Totally. In fact, I have done a review about the last 15 years, and only one paper are using the same technology that we are using. Most of the papers before use near infrared, and the stability of the results of this technology is lower than what we have now. I started this project in 2010. Now in 10 years, it's much better. So yes, we can be talking about 2.0 or even more.
Okay. Magdalena, one for you.
Okay. Yes, the next question came from Bronte Stone, and he would like to ask how outcomes impacted if embryos were selected by the MPI in combination with blastocyst morphology.
Very good question.
So that's actually where I kind of come into play. So what we've been doing is we've been using a complicated grading system that uses how embryos have developed over the course of their time, because we've learned from algorithms that just on morphology, we can kind of predict which embryos are going to implant and which ones are more likely to be euploid. So now what we're doing is we're looking at the secretory profiles of the embryos that are euploid, high and low potentials within the grading systems. And the hopes are that we're going to pick up some of the contributions from the cytoplasm that we tend to kind of ignore, because remember, why aren't we getting 100% implantation rates with euploid embryos? Because we kind of are forgetting about the cytoplasmic contribution to the embryo as a whole. And that's what we're looking at right now. And we're seeing some differences. So in other words, the embryos that cleave early, develop more normally during their in vitro time, all the way up to and including day 5 and day 6, have more normal secretory profiles than embryos that have a pattern where they don't cleave very fast, and then all of a sudden they divide faster. And those embryos could be euploid, but those embryos have lower implantation potentials because the cytoplasmic component of the embryo is perhaps not as in tune as the ones that cleave more normally.
So can we say that the embryo is still quiet? quiet embryo, which was, of course, the hypothesis from Henry Lees years ago.
Exactly. And we're building on the backs of giants like Henry and even some of the Lynette Scott's work looking at early cleavage and stuff like that. So we're putting all that together, showing that embryos that divide quickly or erratic, even though they have a lower tendency to be euploid, they have different profiles as related to the cytoplasmic aspect.
I see. Okay, I'm going to jump in with like a practical question, because years and years ago, I was involved in some metabolomic studies, but the actual practical side of like sampling the microdrops, and again, a question here from Freddie Mayer, and the storage and the shipping, how difficult is that?
Well, in fact, we have to think that these metabolites that are for 3 days are 37 degrees in an incubator. If they are after 3 days there, it's because they are really stable. So it means that probably in the future, we can think that we can store and ship at room temperature, but now we are keeping at -20 and shipping frozen to avoid changes in our development. But we guess that in the future, I mean, these really are very stable. So sampling is only take the pipettes and put in a tube and freezing at -20 until the shipment, because we have to do the analysis in another lab. He knows very well because he's working with our best.
So it's really straightforward. What you do is when you freeze the embryo, instead of throwing the dish away, you just take a glass Pasteur pipette and go in and remove the contents of the microdrop, put it in the PCR tube, you know, with appropriate labeling, put it in a rack and stick it in the freezer, and it's ready to go. And what we're going to do for embryos that we're going to transfer fresh is move them to an intermediate holding dish, take a sample of media, run the media, and then see which of those embryos to transfer, then put them back in their original drop.
Okay, brilliant. Now, if you can stick around, but is there anyone else in the room there? I was expecting it to be very noisy and rowdy like it was in the rehearsals. Is there, have we got a Cynthia there perhaps, or anyone?
Where? Here she is right here. Well, she went to the bathroom, I'm sorry.
No, she didn't.
But she'll be right back.
There she is.
No, here's David though.
Oh, David.
Okay, well, come in, David. Let's see, David. David is the mastermind of this whole thing, so we should really thank him. This is David Genge, okay, from Cook. Okay, so he's really helped us to make this live feed, because of course it's been very exciting that they've now opened up now ASRM, and a lot of exciting things going on. But Cynthia, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Well, we've got a lot of questions. Okay, a lot of it is about the monitoring. Can you tell us a little bit more about the monitoring of this new device?
Sure. I mean, basically, we've got telemetry all over it. We've got it inside the tank. We've got it outside the tank. We've got it on the motors. We've got it on the automation. We have it on the witness RFID. We have it on the internet connection. We have it on our computer systems. We have basically anything that we could slap a sensor on, we did. And we have a network operations center that is monitoring it 24 hours a day. We've termed this, I think I might have said that in our conversation earlier, we called it Overwatch. And so, we have eyes into the entire system at 24 hours a day. Okay,
brilliant. Magdalena, over to you. I'm hogging the questions.
So yes, we have a question from Mangalore Domodar Kimi. Thank you for updating us on all the technology in the lab. Do you think with all this technology, including robotic ICSI, an embryologist would be extinct in 5 years' time?
Extinct in 5 years' time? Absolutely not. In 50 years' time, I think embryology is going to be more of an analytical science perspective. So we're still going to be researching ways of producing gametes. We're going to be researching ways of creating embryos. We're going to be researching ways of growing them and analyzing them and testing them and freezing them and warming them and all of these different aspects. But I see this as an evolution of bringing in automation, bringing in technology, and I think they're going to become more analytical scientists than actual bench scientists. Yes, but not in 5 years. No.
And you often mention about the growing inventory, you know, of these samples. Are you advocating off-site storage more, or storage within the clinic using your new cryo storage device? You know, where does that sort of add into that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He sees.
I mean, I think, hi, Dr. Chen.
Hi, Cynthia. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Hi,
How are you?
Giles. Really good. What are you guys talking about?
You
No,
know,
I thought we were talking about
storage.
sciencey stuff at the moment.
You know,
Yeah,
science stuff.
Science stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I
sciencey
love
stuff.
it.
Sciencey stuff. We thought.
Sciencey stuff.
Where
Okay,
were you?
well,
Where were you? We were waiting for you.
I've been here the whole time and talking about science, but access to science, which I think is really important. But we can maybe do a whole episode about advocacy at some point. What do you
Well,
think?
we can, but well, first of all, stay there. I want to ask you what you've enjoyed at ASRM, just as soon as Cynthia finishes that question. So I want to ask you what happens. I want to know all about it.
Okay, so the short answer is I think that, you know, I think the days of, you know, conceptually, we have to realize that while we historically kept everything on site forever and ever, I think those days are going to end, you know, and for this clinic is going to end today, and for this clinic, it's going to end never. But somewhere in there, we have to realize that we can't continuously store it's burgeoning, exploding inventory on site. We can continue to keep knocking down walls and finding spaces under counters for tanks, but I think, you know, really we have to figure out ways to manage this cryo storage, and I just don't believe that it is all entirely on site. I just can't see that. It's a clinic. It's not a biorepository. And you know,
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay, great. Now stay around. Right, stay around. Serena, what have you enjoyed about ASRM? What's happening?
So I enjoy that ASRM and fertility and sterility are really understanding that social media is actually the primary language for our patients, and that all of us, physicians, providers, scientists, embryologists, we should be putting this information out there on social media. Social media is really where our patients go for most of their information. And honestly, we do too. Like if you don't know something, most of us just Google it. And we have to remember that Dr. Google didn't go to medical school. And therefore the people who actually did go to medical school or actually did get PhDs and actually understand, you know, the medicine and the science behind this really have a responsibility to get this information out on the web, so responsible information is out there. I mean, this is what we're dealing with during the pandemic, right? There's so much misinformation because so many of the voices are not trained at, you know, in medical school or nursing or PhDs. They, you know, these are people who are pseudo scientists or pseudo doctors, and we're, you know, it's literally a life and death situation. So I think I love that all of you guys are here. Like the content you're creating here on i3 has been amazing. I think it's a real service, and I think we should be getting it out to more people, not just our little community.
Well, and that's what we thought we'd dip into ASRM, and you know, I know that the society has like a social media wing, doesn't it? But how important is it for you now to be, you know, amongst your friends? And I've seen the photographs going around. Okay, you know, but how has it been the actual social aspect and the actual networking aspect?
Networking has been is huge, and I think a lot of really interesting and fun collaborations have come out of it. I think, you know, social media can also be used for recruitment, for studies. I think, you know, having a dialogue at that level, it makes this big global community, you know, a lot smaller and intimate. So I think it's a great thing.
Brilliant, brilliant. There's so many more questions, so I think we should dip back into some questions. Magdalena, have you got any questions for the boys?
Yes, absolutely. So we have the question from Kini Jung. She said, thank you very much, Dr. Mune, very exciting talk. I would like to ask if the culture microdrop volume may affect the metabolomics analysis.
Well, we are working with a minimum volume of 25 microliters, but regularly, as you can say better than me, that people are using between 25 and 40 or maximum 50. So the dilution is nothing because this machine, as Santi said before, we have to dilute 25 times the concentration because it's, the resolution is so high that we cannot work with that. So at the end, the baseline and the normalization of the data allow to work with any volume between 15 even to 50. But I want to know what you think about that.
I totally agree. So we've been working at 20 microliter droplets, mostly because that's the size droplets. It seems to be the optimal volume for a single embryo. And then also with the amount of oil that we want to cover the dishes and everything. So from a quality control perspective, a 20 to 25 microliter droplet would be great, assuming that you have at least 1 to 2 millimeters of oil over the top of the drop so that you don't have any evaporation, because it's really important to not have any evaporation of the culture media while the embryo is in the duration, because that, A, that's going to change how well the embryo develops to a blastocyst, but B, it's going to artificially concentrate the metabolites and the nutrients of the culture media in the background. So it is important to make sure that your culture systems are set up carefully. You have enough oil overlay to prevent any evaporation. And the embryos really like to culture in small drops.
Yes, thank you so much. I was actually going to ask follow-up questions. How about the stability of the osmolality, since you are using really very small drops? So thank you so much for this answer. And
it may have been answered, but what about the embryo scope and the other time-lapse machines and even like the well in a well? Do you culture on separate microdrops, or can they be in these devices as well?
I don't have any experience in the using the live action culture systems like an embryo scope or Aztec type cameras. So, but my assumption would be it would be the same. It would just maybe a little more problematic to get the. I don't think you could use a dish fully as capable as you could because of the problem of contamination.
Right. Okay, I've got you. And Cynthia, how has it been the reaction to all your new developments at ASRM? How's it been?
I think people are receiving it pretty positively. I mean, I think people recognize that there's a problem. I think, they've recognized that we're tackling this, in a way. Is it, I think it's, so far so good. You can ask Klaus. I had him over, he saw it, maybe he can give his reactions live on I3. I'm not gonna put him there.
No, I actually thank you for that, because I got to see this amazing piece of equipment up front, and it's brilliant. I mean, the software that you log all the patient information into is very intuitive, because I got an F- in computer data entry, and even I was able to log in a patient successfully and log her out successfully, which is no small feat for a person like myself. But yet I was able to find the embryo, but the most important thing of it is the inventory aspect. When you've got thousands of embryos and you want to find out where they are in anything from infection status to how they were frozen, whatever information you want, Cynthia and her team have done a magnificent job putting that together. So, and I promise you, that's straight from the heart and head, no practice.
I'm touched. Thank you. I appreciate it. Your words mean a lot. So thank you.
It was amazing. It's an amazing thing.
Okay, well, that's all about, it's all about going to a conference and, and the things you see up close as well, which is fantastic, social media has been fantastic. And of course, Zoom calls and whatever. But obviously the networking is great. But I think it's great for like the younger people as well to have a chance to go to conferences to actually network, because some of the more mature people perhaps, you know, shun away. So hopefully we'll see some like hybrid stuff in the future. Now, I did think that one of our I3 panelists would be there, Shyster. Is she around, or has she gone off to one of her lectures? I'm not sure if she's. Are you alone now, guys?
It's just us, man. Everyone else has gone off to meetings. I'm going to have to also head off.
Well, I know you've got to go off. I know it's about time to close, I think, isn't it?
It is. Thank you guys so much. From a user endpoint of using the metabolomics aspect, it's been amazing collaboration. From getting to hang out with Cynthia and her team to see what's going on there. I wish you guys were here, because through social media, we have organized everything from amazing science to amazing happy hours. And on that note, I'll see y'all later.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Anyway, well, I think Magdalena, it's about time to to wrap up. I think. Okay. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of people that passed that cook booth today. But I'd like to thank everyone that was involved there. We saw Klaus Weimer there, we saw his colleague, Cynthia Hudson, Santiago Monet, yourself, Cynthia, thank you very much. Magdalena for being my co-host. And of course, David Gaines, who put this all together. And of course, the talk which we had was sponsored by Overture Life. Again, thanks to the I3 team, which is Jacques Cohen, Peter Nage, Thomas Elliott, Marianne Cervantes, and of course, Shyster Sandruden. So in my end, I'd like to say thank you very much. Over to you, Magdalena.
Thank you so much. Next week, the I3 are having their own annual meeting to discuss exciting news and plans. That's why next session is in 2 weeks' time. So please remember, due to changing the clocks for winter, the I3 session would be at the normal time in US, so 3 p.m. and 1 hour earlier in the UK and Europe. So join us please again on 2nd November for episode 4 of RBM Online Live. And this time the topic is andrology. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Great. Thanks.